I realize this type of video has been done a million times here in MGTOW, but the reason why I'm doing it because the other day I was asking myself, why am I MGTOW? Why do I identify this way? I couldn't get myself to come up with an answer, like a brief summary of why. I felt like I was dismissing my whole experience and just making a sentence or a paragraph describing that, all those years, all the pain, all the heartache, all the delusion, all the fantasies. Felt like I was doing myself a disservice by having this quick response to a real heavy question. I think part of the answer, or most of the answer, lies in standing back and looking at the whole picture. Break it down your whole life, and that takes time. It's not going to be in one video or two. It's not any particular event that led me to MGTOW. It's a culmination of experiences. Looking back, throughout my life, I really saw myself resisting reality. I needed that fantasy. I needed the illusion to function. I feel at peace with my experiences because they've led me to this place of clarity. I think without all that pain and suffering I went through, I wouldn't be here to this place of reality, this clarity. All that weight is off your shoulders. You don't have to think in the fantasy land anymore. You can operate under this new system of looking at yourself and taking care of yourself. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time, but that's your job, to take care of your mental and physical health. At this stage of the game, I don't have the energy to tow around an adult child. I don't have the energy to deal with the constant shit tests, the constant drama. I don't have the energy like I used to. I can't just bounce right back from it because it affects me. If you would have shown me all this content 10, 15 years ago, I just would have laughed at it. You have to get to that point. I'm not a very good storyteller, but I'm going to try to tell a story from my blue pill days to what led me to where I am now. Over 10 years ago or so, talking to girls online was a fairly new thing. It wasn't really figured out yet. I think talking to girls back then online was viewed more or less as a desperation attempt. It had more of a stigma attached to it than it does now. I'm only really telling this story to illustrate at what lengths a young man will go through to acquire a woman. This is just one of many stories I have of the frustration that you have with women, how they approach every situation, just very strange. So I was talking to this girl online for a while. Eventually we spoke on the phone quite a bit, and it was a purely sexual attraction. Finally got up the guts to meet each other. Well, I eventually found out that she lived like 170 miles away. But at the time, that didn't bother me at all. I went through with it. We made plans to meet up. Of course, I had to do all the driving. I had to go to her. I had to travel that 160 plus miles. And on the day that I left, it was a snowstorm. It was a complete blizzard. And I had a small four-wheel drive truck at the time. And I took off. I left early and I went like 40 miles an hour the whole way. It literally took me like 5 or 6 hours to get there. And on top of that, this is before GPS. All I had was a map and some very vague directions, because women suck at directions. They have like no compass. They don't really know where they are. I actually got lost up in the middle of nowhere and eventually found some landmarks that she spoke about in our conversations. So I finally arrive at this so-called destination, and it looked like no one was home. It was an old farmhouse. Everything was covered with snow. It was still snowing out. knocked on the door for a little while, and someone finally came to the door, and it was a younger woman, and it wasn't the woman that I was talking to. Again, it was actually her roommate. So she actually invited me in, and she didn't know when her roommate was going to be back. And so we start talking, and the girl that I went up to see never showed up. We tried calling her a million times. She didn't answer. So I eventually stayed there that night and kind of developed this little thing with her roommate. I stayed there for 2.5 days with her roommate, developed this mini relationship. The last day that I had to leave, the girl that I came up there to see in the first place, she finally shows up and she goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you was going to actually show up." What had happened was she got back with her ex, which she has kids by, that I had knew nothing about. She didn't have the respect to call me and tell me that she was doing this. I had to drive 6 hours to meet her, and she wasn't even there. So eventually I left, and I had to go home because I had to work the next day. Basically running off, no sleep, ate like shit, felt like crap, had to work a long day the next day. And I tried to contact this girl that I had this mini little fling with, and she just totally blew me off. I couldn't get a hold of her, and that was basically the end of that. It was just this odd situation. It was so strange. It was like my emotions were like extreme roller coasters. Happy that I, had this little fling with her roommate, but at the same time, just totally dumped by that roommate, just like treated like I was like a toy. That was a event in my life that you remember those events. Yeah, so that's just an example of one of many interactions with women over my life. Just this constant not making sense of anything. It was just this weird situation after weird situation, and all I wanted to do was just be in a relationship. But to get there, took all my energy, and it was wearing on me over time. And that's just part of the reason why I like the concept of MGTOW so much, because you only have so much energy left, and I don't want to waste it anymore.